Hi, welcome to Cooking Right. I'm Darwin. Today, a simple salsa. Why? Because I don't particularly care for jarred salsa. I like a nice, fresh, crisp taste with some chunks in it. There are some jarred salsas out there that are pretty good, but nothing, absolutely nothing beats a good homemade salsa. That way you can make it the way you want it, you can make it to taste the way you want it, you can make it as salty or non-salty as you want it, you can make it as hot or not hot as you want it. Generally, if I am in a restaurant, I go for the mild, or even in the jarred. If I do have to, am desperate enough for salsa, I buy the mild, just because I'm a wuss. Ketchup tends to be a little hot for me. And that's what Cooking Right is all about. Doing it your way, the right way to you. So, as you can see below, in the picture there, that is a mise en place. I told you about a mise en place last time when we made the pork chops. A mise en place simply means things in place. That thing that just went out of the screen was cilantro. You have tomatoes, red onion, and jalapeno peppers. The proper way to slice a tomato, well, not the proper way. The way I slice a tomato is I like to take the stem end out first, just because it makes it easier for slicing. What I didn't show you is right before I did this bit of chopping, as it were, was I honed my knives. I like to hone my knives right before I work, and sometimes during the work process. Once those are removed, the stem ends, then a slice down the center, and another slice down the center, basically quartering the tomato, or do you say tomato? And then the same cut you would do for filleting a fish. To take the seeds and the veins out of the tomato. I don't like to slice them up with all of that, because then there's too much juice in the salsa, and I do like the salsa juicy, but it comes from other things that I will show you further on down the road here. Again, you want to keep your knife blade on an angle up away from the meat of the tomato, so you don't lose too much of the edible surface. Although all of a tomato is edible, you don't want to lose too much of the said meat, as it were. I keep looking over there because Snoopy is moving around, and I'm waiting for him to bark and get himself interjected into this episode of Cooking Right. He's a bit of a camera hog. Probably takes after me. But what are you going to do? Again, the exact same motion you would do as if you were filleting a fish. Just slide your knife at an upward angle through the veins of the tomato to remove the seeds and whatnot. Now with the larger knife, you want to get ready to do a basic baton with the tomato. Just even strips, and then a nice dice. I went for a smaller dice on this one, just because I like all the vegetables to match in size, if you will. Gives for a better mouthfeel. And depending on the chip that you use, I think it stands up to the chip better. In this case, the chips I made is I bought tortillas, tomato basil flavored tortillas, and then cut them in the shape of a pie. Probably about 16 slices per tortilla, 16 chips. Just in the shape of a pie or a wagon wheel, if you will. Got to make sure your knives are sharp. And as you draw down on the work you're doing, slide the knife forward and away from you. It cuts through the skin much better when you're dicing. The angle of that camera is kind of weird. It looks like the knife is on an angle, but it's not. It's straight up and down. Trust me, I was cutting it. Remove the tomatoes from your cutting surface carefully so they don't wind up all over the floor. That would be no good for anyone, except for Snoopy. He would come over and take care of that for me. But this salsa dish is for human consumption, if you will. My lovely wife and I. After a good cutting board wash, it's time for the jalapeno. This is where you decide how hot you want it. Remove the end and then slice down the middle to expose the veins and the seeds. And in some cases you can flatten it out and do that fillet maneuver again, but in this case the pepper was very fresh and very round. It had to be quartered in order to remove said seeds and veins. And again, with the fish fillet motion, knife on just a slightly upward angle as to not remove the edible meat of the pepper. Gently, don't take your fingers off, that would be bad. And again, we don't need blood in the food. It's that whole germs thing, you know, giving germs to your family if you can't give them to them. But we've gone over that. Cutting them into a smaller baton because you don't want the pieces of pepper too large. There's still some heat in there even though you've removed the seeds and the veins, and you don't want somebody to get more than they bargained for when they bite into your salsa. If that does accidentally happen, give milk, not water. Milk will chill the burn. And then into a very tiny dice. Keep your fingers out of the way of that blade. And one final step, I like to gather all the peppers into one piece and run my knife through them again just to make sure the pieces are quite small. That way they also spread throughout the salsa very nicely that way when they're smaller. And again, no one gets a large piece that could burn quite intensely. Jalapenos are quite heated. I'm not really sure where they stand on Scoville scale, but they're hot. After a good hand washing, celery is next. Trim your exposed ends that have been exposed to the air. And when it comes to celery, you can make the dices as large or as small as you want. Again, I think the key is uniformity. Not like the left would have uniformity, you know, everybody equal by taking from the rich and keeping it for themselves. But, sorry, redistributing of wealth is what I meant. But uniform as in the vegetables all in the same size. Again, it gives for a better mouthfeel. and a better flavor, I feel. So slice your celery down the middle, a little piece for the cook there, down the middle, or you can quarter it. You can, like I said, make it any size you want. Cook right for you. Don't be afraid if you see any wide parts of celery to slice it there as well. You don't have to go all the way down the length of it if you don't want to. Just looking for a nice, a smaller dice, not quite medium, not quite small, but somewhere in between. And there you have diced celery. Lovely. Again, place that into your bowl with the tomatoes and peppers, not on the floor. And now the tearjerker, the onion. Cut it down the middle from the stem end to the root end, and then remove the stem end, keeping the root end intact. Make sure the onion is properly peeled. And then 3/4 of the way through, push your knife down through and slice away. Measure your cuts far enough apart as to where they'll be about the same size as the celery and the tomatoes. And then 1/3 of the way down the onion, like that. Slice into the onion, again 3/4 of the way through, making sure to keep the root end intact. Give that a second cut, and then slice. It's that simple to dice an onion. Again, into the bowl with the peppers. Snoopy is over there snoring. With the peppers, the tomato, and celery. Now for the cilantro, I believe. Give the board a good wipe. And the cilantro's easy. Just give it a whack and knock off some leaves. A lot of flavor in the stems. I don't like to use too many stems. I prefer the leaves. I've just recently become a cilantro fan. Actually, when I was putting together this salsa recipe, I felt it was missing something, so I went for cilantro, and that was the key. That was the key to finishing my salsa recipe to my liking. I cooked right. Pull out any of the bigger pieces of stem that you see, although they will dice up nicely. And then just gather it together and run your knife through it. In the case of cilantro, they're very, how would you put it? They're thin leaves. They don't, even if you left them whole, it wouldn't matter. But I like to run a nice chop on them so they release their flavors. There you have your before thoroughly mixed salsa. One spoon for tasting, 1 spoon for stirring. Because you have to taste your mix. You have to know what it tastes like before you serve it. You don't want it to be a mystery to you, the chef. I like to use red wine vinegar as part of the liquid. And this is to taste. With only 2 tomatoes and 1 pepper, somewhere between a teaspoon and a tablespoon would be apropos. And a shot of lime juice. Normally, you would want to use fresh lime and some lime zest. However, I find when I buy produce like that, if I'm not going to use it right away, it goes bad, and then I'm caught without any. Pinch of salt from my unbelievably awesome salt container. Purchased in Vegas, baby. That's right, man. Las Vegas. And my final ingredient, the pasty resistance chipotle pepper. Not for its heat, but for its smoky flavor. And we go with about teaspoonish, thereabouts. Not even a teaspoon, maybe 3/4 of a teaspoon. Give it a good stir as to incorporate all the ingredients. As our president would say, to spread the wealth. Although we don't agree with that here. It's just a matter of mixing the ingredients to incorporate them thoroughly. Give that a good taste. See what we got going there. See if the seasonings are right. By the way, the salt, pinchish, to your taste. Whatever you think is right. Hence the name Cooking Right. There you have it. Salsa, the easy way, the homemade way, the right way. So what do you think? Gonna do some salsa? That's up to you. You can, or you don't have to. Well, once again, this has been Cooking Right with Darwin. I'm Darwin, and I really appreciate you guys watching. Remember, cook right, stay right. Bye-bye now.